Yeah, you can go now.
Thanks, Tejas, and thanks for organizing this. When we were in college, we were always looking for such kind of talks because at that time, like you basically have no idea of the industry, how things are going, and like what kind of different roles are there in the industry till you step your foot in the industry. So thanks for organizing this. Hello, everyone, and I'm Bhavya. Yeah, this is like a nice opportunity for everyone to get to know a little bit from my experience, what I know for last 6 years of working as a quant. And at any time, just if you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. Let's try to keep it as interactive as possible. So they just shared with me like a bunch of questions that everyone had asked in a note. And from those questions, I tried to make like a general theme of like what people are more curious about from the whole talk. So I can quickly talk about some of the things which I could get the sense of questions. And after that, if you have more questions, yeah, very happy to take them over. Um, so I think like the first very simple question. Before I go, I can just quickly introduce myself also. As they just told, like I graduated in 2015. After that, for 2 years, I worked at Goldman Sachs. That's Bangalore office. That's where I did my internship out of the campus internship program, and I got a PPO. So that's where I worked for the first 2 years. Over there, I was working as a derivative pricing quant. So if some of you don't know any like some of these words, it's totally fine. You can ask me in the questions later. But idea was like actually working on certain mathematical models to do the pricing of certain financial products in the market. Um, that was basically the kind of role. So it's not exactly front office, it's not back office, it's somewhere in between. You work very closely with, let's say, the team of traders and team of structurers as a team of quant. So there are like in big organizations, I'll come to how things are structured generally, but it's you have different desks which are trading in different kind of financial products, and each desk has a team of traders, a team of quants, and a team of structurers. In Bangalore office, they would generally have only team of quants who would work with onshore offices like Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, and London. Um, After that, like that was 2 years there, and after that, for 1 year, I worked at JP Morgan. That was more machine learning and data science role. So in JP Morgan, they formed up a central data science team of the whole JP Morgan banking branch. And over there, they created a new team. So it was a relatively short experience for me. I was there for 10 months, but happy to give you my like experience out of there also. After that, I moved to Amsterdam. So for last 4 years, I'm living here, working with a firm called Algorithmic Trading Group, ATG in short. It's a 12-year firm, a 12-year-old firm. Started out of Hong Kong, but mostly, let's say, by Dutch founders. So now the head office is in Netherlands. When I joined, I was the third person to join the team here. And to give you an idea, like how small the firm is, in last 4 years, we are 7 people now. So we practically hired one person a year for last 4 years. So still a relatively small firm, and we don't plan to become very big anytime. But I'll come to more on how different kind of firms are structured. So that was a little bit about me. So the first question that I saw in the questionnaire was like, what is quant? So very fair question. Um, I think quant is just a term which is used in the industry for a broad set of roles nowadays because there are just way too many roles which can be put in the quant category. So quant came out of like the term quantitative, and if I have to simply say, it's anything where the role is a little more quantitative, that role can be practically called quant, right? So I'll come to how different kind of roles are there because people had asked, okay, what's the difference between a quant researcher and a quant developer? So I'll come to all that. But anything which has something to do with like quantitative calculations, quantitative modeling, anything you can imagine can be put in the quant category. So first, like I have basically three things that I thought which would cover most of the questions. One is like spectrum of industry. So to give you guys an idea about how the industry is structured in, let's say, finance and trading world. Um, do a bit of comparison between what are buy side firms, sell side firms, big firms, small firms, working in India versus working internationally. So I'll just compare these kind of things a little bit. Then there was a little bit, few questions around pros and cons of working in a quant role, around work-life balance and everything. So we can cover that also. And then the third thing that I'd come to is like the spectrum of roles which are out there. So what's a developer versus a trader versus a researcher, etc. So at any point, if you have questions, yeah, just ask in between. That's totally fine. I'll pause. So for the spectrum of industry, just to give you an idea, so there are, let's say, two main kind of companies which one could be working for, and they're broadly categorized as buy side versus sell side. So sell side firms are more like investment banks. Most of the names that you would have heard are Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citibank, Deutsche Bank, right? All the big names that you would have heard. They are basically called the sell side firms. The reason they are called the sell side firms is because a lot of financial products, these are the companies who are basically creating and selling in the market. So this all basically the big investment banks, a few ETF issuing companies, mutual fund companies could come in the sell side. Mutual fund, not so much, but yeah, mostly investment banks, let's say. And then there's the other category, which is like the buy side firms. So buy side firms are all the other jargons you would have heard, like high frequency trading firms, prop trading firms, hedge funds, pension funds, wealth management funds, like family offices. So all these come on the buy side category of like the industry. If I have to name a few on the buy side in India, I think the popular ones are Tower Research, Graviton Capital, Quadeye, and yeah, these are like some of the popular ones in India. And if internationally I have to name one, few of the biggest names are Optiver, Citadel, Flow Traders, and yeah, ATG is also becoming big sooner or later. Then the next, yeah, I would cover a little bit difference between like a big firm and a small firm. So this, I think like a lot of people don't appreciate so much of the difference, like, but the work culture is very, very different in a big firm compared to a, let's say, a relatively smaller firm like ATG. So I've worked in bigger firms like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan initially, and then I worked in working in a smaller firm. So I can tell you more differences. So in a bigger firm, like if you are in any kind of role, things are a lot more. No problem. So yeah, in a bigger firm, like things are a lot more structured. There's a lot more bureaucracy. There's a certain set of roles, like you would have heard in SDEs in a software development role that you go through certain levels. So it's similar in a let's say bigger firm. So you start at an internship, or let's say if you're going directly by placements at an analyst level, and then after a couple of years you are promoted to an associate level. Another couple of years you are promoted to a VP, vice president, or executive director. Then it really depends on how you perform after becoming a VP. And it might, for some people, it might take 3 to 4 years, or some people, it might take 10 to 15 years. But after that, people aim to become a managing director. So it's like a ladder that you have to climb. And I wouldn't say like it's completely bureaucratic or anything. It's also merit based, right? The better you perform, the faster you, let's say, go above the ladder. And in a smaller firm, things are much more different. Work culture wise, they operate much more like a startup, you can say. Not like a tech startup who's in a immediate hurry to just grow super big, but more like uh, as like a very close knitted team, which is always working on certain projects, and then everyone is contributing to basically every dimension of the business. So I can tell you a little more when I come to different kind of roles and my experience of working in a smaller firm to give you more idea. But all these firms, like the names that you would have heard, Citadel, Optiver, they are relatively big firms. So if you're going there in a specific role, chances are that you will be working on that role. for a long time before you can, let's say, move around to different roles. But if you go to a much smaller firm like ATG, Da Vinci, I know a lot of names, but not properly familiar with you guys. So over there, things are much more, let's say, fluid. So you can move from one role to the other role, and you would be basically working out for most of the roles in the company because teams are relatively small. Teams can be as small as like 2 or 3 people also sometimes. So there are companies which are only 2 or 3 people companies. So my company is like almost 12 people globally now, out of which 7 are in Amsterdam office, 3 in Hong Kong, 1 in London. So this way, like we have 3 offices for 12 people. Um, yeah, but like I'm happy to answer more specific questions if there are any, work culture wise, etc. But that's a little bit of broad difference. Um, then is like work location wise, it's like most of you would have roles of like either Indian companies or would get opportunity to go out internationally. So there are some like only few of the major cities which have the environment of these companies. So you'd always find such companies in smaller or some non-trivial cities also. But most of the firms, let's say 90% of the firms are in big cities of the world that you would have heard. So that's in US, that's New York, Chicago. In Europe, that's London, Amsterdam, a little bit in Zurich in Switzerland. So that's basically the whole Western Hemisphere. And then if you come to East, now we have a lot of such companies in Gurgaon, a few of them in Mumbai. Hong Kong has a lot of such companies, Singapore, and yeah, that's mostly it. Australia has a few nice firms, but these are the major hubs where you'll have most of these companies. A lot of international firms won't hire directly from the college. I know a few does, like Optiver, Citadel, maybe, or Jump Trading. But if they're hiring, most of them would hire for Indian roles. A lot of smaller firms like my firm, we don't hire straight out of college generally. We generally look for someone who has a little bit of experience, 1 year, 2 years. If we are hiring from college, then it's generally a Dutch college. But a couple of, I think, firms in US also hire, but then there are all these visa issues with US. And I don't know if any firm in Singapore and Hong Kong also directly hires straight out of college in like trading firms I'm talking about. But on the buy side firms, like all the bigger names that you have heard, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citibank, Deutsche Bank, I think most of them come to Morgan Stanley. They come to the college anyway. So yeah, hiring wise, you guys would know already better than me. Or maybe Rishabh can pitch in there because he has more recent experience. Pros and cons of a quant role, work-life balance were the few of the questions people wanted to cover on it. So actually, let me come to this after talking about the spectrum of roles, because then I can talk more about it. So in the different spectrum of roles, I'll basically call quant, I'll put quant into 4 categories. Okay. First are basically quant developers. Second are quant researchers. Third are quant strategists. Fourth are quant traders. So it's developer, researcher, strategists, and traders. And this is basically a spectrum in which you can relate developer role to be most similar to any software developer role, right? You will be writing systems. So you'll most likely be a full stack developer in which you are writing very efficient, high frequency systems most of the times, which are extremely speed optimized, right? But your role is really, really focused towards developing the systems and worrying less about let's say markets or financial aspects of the firm and everything. So it's really much more closer to the developer slash system person role. Then comes quant researcher kind of roles, right? In which things are much more to like relatable to a data science position or a machine learning or AI kind of a position in current companies, in which you would really be reading a lot of research papers, what is happening currently in the quant market, and also doing your own research. You'll be using a lot of new machine learning algorithms, playing with a lot of big data. Data is infinite in this industry. So that's more like let's say you can relate more to ML AI kind of a role. Then there are quant strategists. These are the people who also work a lot with like low level languages like C++, C sharp, but also at the same time writing algorithms which would actually be used to trade in the market or to do the pricing of certain financial products. So these kind of roles are the exact bridge between, let's say, developer and trader. So these are the people who basically have a bit of know-how of both computer science and markets, and then they sit in between to make a bridge between the two spectrums of, let's say, finance and the computer science. Then there are quant traders, right? These are the people who are less working on the coding, right? Most of the times they are either using Python to do some analysis on the trades that they are doing, etc. But mostly they are managing their books. So books as in like the portfolios. So these are basically, yeah, people who are actively trading and in the market and managing the risk and everything, like, and they basically move on to become portfolio managers in the future. So these are basically the four spectrum. And if I have to, like, I gave you a relation between what you could relate, like developer most closer to software developer, researcher more closer to the MS data science role, strategist being a bridge between finance and trading, finance and computer science, and traders like more on the finance side. Then if I have to talk about like the work-life balance, so I'll be honest, like the controls are, from my experience, a little more demanding than a software developer role in a tech company, right? Compared to, like, I've always been jealous of some of my friends working at Microsoft and Google, right? So my like controls are a little more demanding, but I wouldn't like call them as bad as some people have, um, like, let's say, made them infamous as far as work-life balance is concerned. The thing that I think differs is as you move from more developer kind of a role to more trader kind of a role, there's a lot more discipline that is required. So job becomes less flexible, right? So developers job is always much more flexible. You can be moving around, right? You could just have your laptop and you could be working basically from anywhere, and hours are generally a lot more flexible, right? The targets are at the weekly slash bi-weekly levels. But as you become a trader, then there's a lot more discipline required because you have to be behind the screens as per the market timings most of the times. Like if I have to tell you about my current situation, I have to be in the office at 8 in the morning every day, right? So it's basically wake up at 6:30, be ready, and then go through all the news and everything what's happening in the world every day by 8:30 in the morning. 9 o'clock the European markets open, and then you have to be basically there. There's no chance you just reaching 10 o'clock someday because you just didn't feel like. That's not how it works. So it's definitely much more discipline required, but there's also like flexibility in terms of, yeah, no one is ever working on weekends, evenings. If there's a schedule, like someone is, it's already scheduled if you will be working on the evening or not. It's very rare that something just came up and you are spending 16 hours in a day in at work. That very very rarely happens. And another thing that I have like observed toward work-life balance is it's much nicer in Europe than compared to US or India. Um, but yeah, that's like I can answer more, but that's basically my experience with respect to work-life balance. It's not the best, but it's not something anyone can't deal with either, I think. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
already
we have a
I've
question
taken
in the
some time.
chat. Like, how useful is doing masters in computational finance or mathematical finance for quant roles? So, what are your insights on that? Like, you must be having some colleagues with those degrees, right? So,
Yeah, I have a few friends who did certain like such degrees. I don't have any colleagues who did such degrees. Um, I think the way I see them is like, even if they are not so much beneficial in the coursework they will provide, but that can be an entry into a market. So if you want to be doing a quant job in US, then I think going via a master's degree is, yeah, much better because you get all like much easily, you get a work visa and the companies just hire from there then.
mhm.
Coursework wise, it really depends, like which university it is, what their courses are, what kind of industry you want to go to. Uh, but yeah, I didn't do a master's, so I don't have a lot to comment on that.
Yeah, so Rishabh, do you want to add something regarding like what the you must have read the questionnaire as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
So one question, like where do you read the chat? In my chat, I don't see any questions.
is
So if
it
someone has questions, they can post on the chat, and I can also try to answer when Rishabh is speaking.
yeah, they are you must be seeing at the chat because wait a minute.
the chat icon on top right. Yeah.
Okay, I see it blank. I see the icon, but never mind. I'll try. Rishabh, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so in my company also there's not a lot of people who have done masters in computational finance or any such things. I I'm just guessing, but I think that might be more common in the sell side firms. I'm just guessing. I'm not. I I don't have any data on that. Yeah. So the thing is that generally with uh, trading is that experience matters much more than the any coursework you do because um, anything that's available in public knowledge is generally not profitable for us because you need to come up with your own stuff. Yeah, so like masters is generally not advisable. I mean, as Bhavya said, that it's a good entry into the field, but if you're already in the field, I've not seen many people pursue masters.
Yeah, and also there were some questions related to what are the skills required for the quant job or intern? Like, what are the skill sets that companies look for in the resume and even the interviews?
Okay, so I'll answer based on like for fresher roles that generally, if you look at hiring for like the HFTs and similar firms, they're hiring from IITs, so they do not expect a lot of financial background or financial knowledge, right? So they just want a person who has a knack for numbers, who like who can understand things better, who has a strong mathematical background, and financial stuff is generally like it's taught on the job. You don't expect the person to be a finance guru. So it's really all about like a strong fundamentals of stats, maths, and stuff.
So yeah, the follow-up question to this. So if someone is preparing a resume for quant roles and jobs like straight out of college, so what areas he should focus upon, like in the resume?
All right. I don't think like for quant roles you can really cater that much. I mean, unless you have an intern in the field, but like you can just show your math. If you can show your math background, if you can just mention your coursework that you have done in the math. But ultimately, for a fresher role, I would say it all matters in the interview. You do not have a lot you can put on your resume because like I didn't have any trading background. I interned at Samsung in my third year. So, but like they didn't even see my resume. Honestly, the interview had a look at it and just said the resume side.
Yeah, to add on to that, like the things that matter the most, at least the things that we ask are aptitude questions, puzzles, probabilities, right? And like the things that mostly companies like Goldman Sachs would be asking.
Mhm.
So yeah, and a little bit of interest, I would say. Like if anyone has any experience in trading or generally understands like the world. Nowadays, it has become accessible to everyone, like via cryptos, right? So if even if you show certain interest that you have at least tried to understand the industry a little bit, that helps a lot along way.
Okay, we have some questions in chat as well. So, how hard it is to jump from a SD role to quant and vice versa?
Yeah, I answered it in summary,
Yeah.
but it's if it's like a developer role, then it's very easy because it's very similar. And then I know a lot of people working who were working in Google are now working at Citadel or Jump Trading. And then vice versa also, I know some people who are working at Flow Traders have gone to work for Microsoft now. But these are people who are working as developer roles in those companies also. But if it's more like a trader role, then it becomes difficult. Like for me personally now, I don't think I can just simply go and start working in an SDE role after being for 4 years being a trader now. So
Adding
it
to
wouldn't be like I'll get the same level of someone who would get 4 years working in a software job.
got it. And adding to that, like, is the like as you said, like for the developer role, it is easy to switch. But adding to that, is the number of years of experience also important there? Like, if someone is a SD in Google for suppose say 8 or 9 years, so it would be much difficult for 8 or 9 years guy compared to having only 1 or 2 years experience in Google to switch, right?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, like these kind of companies hire basically the best tech people in the world. So the person who made the C# compiler in Microsoft, who worked for like I think 15 years in Microsoft or something,
Mhm.
he was hired by Flow Traders to as to lead their to make their own compiler. So they have their own compiler now because the C++ compiler was too slow for them.
And like, what about quant researcher switching to an SD role? So is it possible?
Again,
Would you say?
depends. Yeah, I mean it's quite similar, but yeah, I think it's all possible, but more in like let's say the early stages. But the more you spend time in a certain
Mhm.
industry, then yeah, it helps. Especially in quant, like it's a very close knit industry, right? Like in terms of roles. So if you like exclude the big companies, then after that there are only very few companies, and everyone basically knows everyone after a certain years of experience.
Mhm.
And then yeah, it really helps that if you're coming within the industry. I think going to a software role is certainly more possible than vice versa.
Got it. And also, as you mentioned, since the work-life balance is not that great in quantitative firms compared to SD firms, so what happens after 10 to 15 years? Like, what do people do? Like, don't they get burnt out after doing a lot of work for the first 10 years? Like,
It's not a lot of work, I would say. It's just like where you find your balance. Like some people are okay working 10 hours a day, 8 hours, 9 hours a day
Mhm.
properly. Some people just want to work 4 5 hours a day, right?
Yeah,
So if that's the case, then I wouldn't recommend a quant role. So it's generally a little more requiring. Like yeah, people do spend 7 8 9 hours proper work days, and it's just a little more discipline that's required in at least in a trader kind of a role. That if market is opening at 9, yeah, you've got to be working at 9.
Hmm. And another question there was like, how useful is machine learning and deep learning knowledge in quant? Like, how they are related to each other? Like, for especially for quant researcher role, as you mentioned, it is similar to that.
Yeah, yeah, it's basically machine learning and data science, the quant
So
researcher role.
yeah, so having it on the resume, would it help?
Yeah, for a quant research role, it would definitely help.
There's another question. What is the accuracy you achieve on your strategies?
Hmm. Yeah, it depends like what kind of what kind of firm it is. So if you're talking about like a very high frequency trading firm, right, their accuracies are generally on the scale of 90 95% also. Most of the trades they do are profitable, but the profits they earn are really really small. Then there are more startup kind of strategies, so they are more statistical, so they are more model backed. And then they're like you might be getting, let's say, 70% of the trades as profitable and 30% could be lost trades also. So I've seen people who run strategies with profitable trades at 60% also, but they don't survive very long. But if it's like a fully arbitrage strategy, like just buying some share at 100 and selling it at 101 in two different markets within a microsecond, then that would always be profitable.
There are a few more questions here. What are some resources from where we can learn about HFT algos and the type of mathematics they use?
It's very hard, I think, to learn things online. There are not many good resources online that you can just learn and know everything. I think it's best that you do an internship or something at some company. That's, I think, from my point of view, that's the best way.
Yeah, I agree because you can learn just about like you can read about upon a few indicators and all, but you won't see a lot of proper HFT algorithms because I mean no HFT is going to share their algorithms online.
Yeah. There was one more question about this. Are the risk management or the classic asset management roles classified under the strategist profile in sell side firms or hedge funds? So they are neither. They are basically asset management firms, right? As the name says. Risk management is different than asset management. Asset management is more like allocating your assets. Risk management is basically in every kind of firm, there will be a risk management team, right? So even if it is like a prop trading firm, a hedge fund, everyone would have, let's say, a chief risk officer and a team under him, most likely, whose role is to make sure that the losses are not blown out of the air ever in the company and the company survives, right? So they measure all kind of risks, like it could be technical risk, it could be market risks, it could be operational risks. If you develop a very good algorithm, how do you stop other firms from stealing it? Is there a way to patent it? It's no, there is no way to patent any algorithm. How do you stop others from? So, like to tell you this, like algorithms most of the times are not the most complex things, right? It's to put it simply, from my point of view, it's not very difficult to make money, right? Making money is easy. It's rather very hard to not lose money, right? Losing money is also very easy. So I think most of the algorithms people run are, let's say, people know about that. At least they have a bit of familiarity. But if you write a very good model, that's your IP, right? If it's not like you write something and anyone can steal it. It's mostly you who needs to constantly keep improving your algorithm as the market situation changes, and then that becomes your intellectual property. And if you have such a thing, then yeah, you could be making a lot of money very soon because you can just go to another firm. You can tell them, hey, I have an algorithm. This works, like it has a huge, nice run. It always makes profit, etc., etc. There are firms who would put in a lot of money, a lot of a lot of resources behind you, and you could make a very nice cut of the profits that you generate for them, and then that becomes your IP. And yeah, so it's a way to make very good money very quickly.
Yeah, adding to that, could you give the insight on non-compete in the quant firms?
Yeah, maybe Rishabh can tell more about India first, then I can tell a little bit about it.
In India, like there's generally a very long non-compete clause. It can be 6 months or even up to a year, I've seen. So it's generally like you cannot switch from an HFT to an HFT because there's a lot of shared knowledge. It's generally not applicable if you want to switch to, say, an SD or even if you want to go to an investment bank or certain kind of roles. So it's basically a deterrent to stop people from just switching on the go.
Yeah, it's similar here also. It's like for fresher jobs, it's like 3 months to 6 months. And as you go senior, then some firms have seen like having 2 years non-compete also. But then, yeah, people make use of such non-competes and switching to do a quick masters or anything. People don't switch a lot also, like as much as people switch in SD roles I've seen. Probably this is the reason.
Okay. So what are the things we must prepare to get into an internship for quant role for companies like GS, JP Morgan, Quadeye, etc.? So maybe Rishabh can take it.
Yeah, so for internship, like I said earlier, we don't expect a lot of financial background, but obviously, if you have shown interest in the field, if you have any project in the field, it's helpful. If you have shown that yes, you want to do stuff like this, and again, a strong maths background, any project based on where you have done work in data, data science project is also good. Yeah, so basically, it's just show that you want to work in the field, you want to do stuff like this.
Yeah, adding to that, there is also a list of books and website compiled by us, by like me and Rishabh Bhaiya. Then I will just share it in the chat. You can refer that.
So, and
Yeah, so you can refer to this as well. Like Rishabh Bhaiya can add to this, like what all is essential in this.
yes, so like generally for the uh, fresher roles, I think you need to focus on your probability and you need to focus on your stats. It's not like yeah, and like Bhavya mentioned, a strong aptitude. Like generally, we would ask puzzles in the interview. We want to know how you approach things. So
There's a question on, can you give insights into what a quant strategist do with their day-to-day what their day-to-day responsibilities look like? I can answer that from like my experience, right? My role at GS over there, like most of the day we would be brainstorming, right? And writing code. That's what we would do. And the code would revolve around writing mathematical models, tweaking things here and there, making like running a lot of simulations, seeing the results, tweaking things again, running the simulations again, talking to the, let's say, the risk team, getting certain, like writing certain model docs, model documentations, getting them approved. So that's more like on a bigger firm, things work relatively slower, right? In a more trading firm, right, like a prop trading firm, a quant strategist role would be managing the trading strategies, immediately spotting if there are any issues, putting the fix in, and rolling out the code multiple times a day sometimes also. The difference is like whatever you do, your impact is like really, really fast. Sometimes I'm making my code changes in the morning, and by the evening, we can already see the returns because of those changes in numbers, right? In actual PNL numbers. So it's like that's another pro of working in a smaller firm. Are the trades based solely on stats as algos can deal with them, or are our news or our news dealt? Yeah, there are many ways to deal with the news. People do all kind of things, be it from Twitter, be it from Bloomberg. There are news feeds that you could pay and subscribe for. And it really depends if your strategy is news dependent or not. Some strategies are just agnostic of news, more trading on, let's say, indices and ETFs, kind of products which are less influenced by company news. How do you find opportunities for trader jobs? As very few, almost none come for campus placements. Yes, that's correct. I think straight out of campus or from a BTech degree, I think it's hard to find a trader job role. I would recommend just getting into the industry, making contacts, and then in 2 or 3 years, you can jump onto a trader role. Or doing some internship and already making contacts would help. But yeah, companies couldn't come to hire trader roles straight out of college generally. Do we need to get into a more theoretical part of probability, or it's just the puzzle solving based on basic probability? Yeah, the later. You don't need to know a lot of theory of probability, but some interesting questions like I can share some books also in the probability books I have in that link. But they're like top 50 probability problems and like these kind of books. And then they're generally fun to solve also. You can do like a couple of problems a day and then you are good in a month, I think.
Yeah, also there was this question related to like government has put certain regulations to this trading firms. So what's your take on that? Like in the future, it would be more tight, or like what is the future of that?
Yeah, regulations are always very strict with the trading firms, right? Like, and I think they're needed also because these are basically computers doing the trading and they could be influencing the markets a lot. And it has happened in the past. So regulations are much needed and it's good that they are being put. And would that make them go out of the business? No. Would it make the business harder? Maybe. Would they stay profitable? Yes.
There's another question, I guess.
How easy it to lose your job as a quant strategist? And if you do, how many options do you have to fall back upon? More specifically for HFTs in India. So maybe Rishabh can tell that.
So I've not really seen many people anyone lose their job. Like most people, if you have any,
It wouldn't be so hard either. I mean, like if you want to, you can totally do that.
it is very easy to do so if you want to, but like it doesn't just happen. And like even if you're falling back on your performance, your mentor and your manager will help you get up to speed, or will help you to find where you are falling back up on. So like it's not that like they don't just fire you on the go. That stuff doesn't happen. And you know, speaking about the options, I think I mean if you're good enough to get into an HFT in India, you are good enough to get into most firms. So unless you have really fallen on a personal level,
Yeah.
like if you are not showing any kind of commitment or hard work, then that's a different question.
Yeah.
But
If a whole firm is sacked, then I think you'll just get a job in another firm very easily.
yeah,
And that does happen, right? So companies die. It takes like sometimes 5 minutes for a company to just disappear also. So like companies of like our scale, like my scale, like very small companies, yeah, the risk appetite is generally higher, and it is possible that you lose not just your job but the whole company in a span of 5 to 10 minutes, right? And then yeah, I think it's still very easy to find a new job after that. There was also one question in the document about like non computer science, electrical, electronics, MNC for these people. Like, is it also possible to go in quant? And then also there was a question around CPI. So all I can say is like my mentor in Goldman Sachs, he was from physics department. He had a CPI of 6, and he was by far one of the smartest person on the floor there. So I think that all doesn't matter. Like if you are really into this field, then you can get in and you can prove it inside. No one
yeah,
has CPI after first year.
yeah. I mean, as a fresher, you will face some difficulties regarding CPIs. Like most companies care about that, but as Bhavya mentioned, after a few years, after even 1 year or so, if you have shown your work in another company, you can easily switch.
Yeah. Give some insights on infrastructure needed for HFT. It's for high frequency itself, like things have become like really high frequency now. So people are programming wise, most of them are writing in C++. Right? So, and infrastructure wise, there are different components to the software. It is like one is what do you get as input? That's the, let's say, the market data, the status quo of what the market is. You have to be very fast in processing that, generating your signals and making the decisions. What do you want to do with them? Right? All of this has to be like really fast, and then you have to execute on those decisions. So there are generally three major components, right? Receiving the things, processing and sending your instructions out. All of this is generally extremely low level, and yeah, people just like try to save every microsecond they can. There's a lot of network components also involved in it, because a lot of latency comes just physical latency between point A to point B, the time it takes for information to travel. And there are a lot of optimizations on that also, like optic fiber, co-location in the exchange. Most of the companies have their servers inside the exchange as to avoid any physical distance. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot happening there every day.
Yeah, there's another question related to working in a small firm and a bigger firm. Like, what's the difference between the learning curve? Which is better? Like, and why yourself you choose a small to work in a smaller firm compared to a bigger firm?
Yeah, I think bigger firm, there are pros and cons of both, right? If you're working in a smaller firm, you would really understand the whole business in a shorter span of time. And if you're working in a bigger firm, you would learn A, how to work in a bigger firm, right? B, just you'll end up making more contacts in the industry because there's just more people in a bigger firm. C, whatever you are doing, you tend to become better in that specific thing, right? Rather than getting the whole knowledge of the whole business. So learning curve, I think it's all depends on you. If the more you learn, the faster the learning curve is. But I think it's possible in different directions to learn in both of them.
Yes. Also, there's one more question. Like, what is the biggest advantage of being a quant compared to a SD in the long run? So, any insight on that?
It really depends on the interest, in my opinion. Like you should go where what you like to do.
Mhm.
Nothing else matters in the like long run.
Also, like, do like initially the quant firms pay better compared to the SD firms initially, if you're out of the college, straight out of the college, but after some years, like after say 5 or 10 years, can the SD guys catch up with the compensation of that quant? Is like
So at least internationally, don't know. I think in India also, but mostly like quant firms' salaries don't grow as much as software salaries grow, right? The salaries generally peak at a certain level. In quant firms, it's all about bonus in the end, right? So, like if I have to talk about Europe, a quant is earning 60% roughly of what a software developer would be earning as a base salary. So you would say, yeah, that's very low. But it's in the end the whole bonus game, right? After a point, it all depends on how much money you make for the firm. Sorry, I'm hearing some disturbance in the call.
yeah, even I am. I don't know.
That's good now. So it
Yeah,
depends
so
on.
including the bonus part. So like, how do
Yeah,
you compare including the bonus part? Like,
I
if
mean, if you're good, you can make hell lot more money in quant than you can do as a software trader, software developer.
okay.
Like I've seen people making millions of euros also in 7-8 years into the industry. But not everyone does that also. You should know it's like there's much more aspect of risk involved.
Lower floors and higher ceilings. The
Yeah.
quant, like SD is much more stable, you can say.
Rishabh,
Yeah.
Bhaiya, I think there is some disturbance from your side. You can
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay, there are some questions in chat as well. Do big investment bankings do high frequency trading? And if
No,
say, okay, they don't.
no, they are not allowed to do it. So like there are big firms which do high frequency trading, but then they are only high frequency trading firms. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they are not allowed to do high frequency trading.
Also, what's the difference between a proprietary trading firm and a hedge fund?
So that's a technical difference. A proprietary trading firm trades on proprietary funds. So mine is like a proprietary trading firm, right? So we don't take anyone else's money, right? It's our money, let's say, founders' money. and then we are just using that capital, right, and trying to multiply that capital via our trading strategies, right? And in the process, if we get returns, we take part of it, at the same time contributing to the markets by market making, etc., making markets more efficient, finding the discrepancies. A hedge fund is generally someone who takes money from HNIs, high net worth individuals, and they would have certain clients. They would take money, and then they would trade or invest on the client's money. And as a fund, they will get both management fees, right, which ranges from 2 to 3% of the assets under management, and then a P&L percentage cut also. So if they make, let's say, 40% returns on a million, on 10 million, so that's like 4 million euros. So they get 20% of the profit as a reward also. So hedge funds basically operate on clients' money. Proprietary trading firms trade on proprietary funds.
Yeah, another question. Big hedge funds like World Quant mostly don't prefer to hire BTech freshers for strats role. So what one should do to get into those? Masters or experience in quant role in other firms? Like, it's a question there.
Yeah, Rishabh, do you know? I mean, yeah, I know very less about what kind of prospects open up after a master, so I'm not the right person to answer that.
Rishabh, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I have also not done masters, and I don't have many colleagues who have done masters. It's not something that's generally required in an HFT.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for World Quant, I honestly I don't know. I would have to look up. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's, if you look internationally, most of the senior quants or like really renowned quants, they are all PhDs then, right? I've seen very few people who just did masters to get into the quant roles. It's, yeah, you either get some experience, in my opinion, that's better, right? Or you go for a PhD. That would be better.
Hello, am I audible? I have a doubt.
Yeah.
So you said most of the senior quants have a PhD, but it's not like they did a PhD for quant, right? Like they did a PhD and then they were hired for quants.
Yeah, they became quants. PhD is a long time. The mind changes with, like, people change their mind what they want to do. Most of the, like, some of the people when they go into PhDs want to be in academia, but once they start PhD, they realize issues with academia, and then they figure out other roles, and then they
Yeah,
jump to
so
quant
like
roles.
just doing a master's for the sake of a quant is like the motivating factor for a master should not be a quant, right? Like there can be
Yeah.
better ways to get into a quant.
Yeah, I think so. Like the only advantage of masters I see is like really getting into that that industry. I think like if you want to do a job in US, then masters is a ticket to US. It's like how I see it.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Also adding to that question, like some firms like Two Sigma and all, like they have a lot of people with higher degrees. Like they have under 600 people with masters and 200 with PhD. So like these kind of firms look for that, right? For the higher degree.
Yeah. I mean, IIT BTech is also regarded pretty high, so they don't worry too much about like your degree, I would say.
Okay, there are a few more questions in the chat. Is it possible to transition to a role as an SD with equivalent experience after a few years as a quant strategist or trader, or one would have to start from the bottom of the ladder? Yeah, so like if you switch your job from like after 4 or 5 years, so do we have to start as SD1 or 2 in the tech firm?
Maybe I should do some SD interviews and then I can answer this. But yeah, it's hard to say. It really depends person to person. Like what's the situation at that time between his current experience, who's hiring. There's no like one answer to this. Of course, you won't be starting bottom of the ladder, right? If you have been a quant strategist, you've probably been coding, right? I still code 40%, 50% of my day, but my job is not just coding now. It's more about managing risks, managing a portfolio, which is not really someone in an STE role would be looking for. So that kind of experience becomes irrelevant, but my experience with programming would still be beneficial for an STE job, I believe. So if like I have to go for an STE role, I would expect I go at a level where someone is 4 years experience. I don't know. I'm just making a guess.
Okay. So is the bonus-based pay system there in India in big IBs as well?
Yes, that's a. Even though they pay a healthy base salary, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, etc., but bonus components are also very critical, like much more critical as you like spend more time in the industry. They become more and more significant.
Okay. Also, are there any restrictions on personal trading if you work for a quant firm? Like, can you maintain your personal portfolio as well while working for a quant firm?
Yeah, mostly you can. Sometimes there are some restrictions on how frequently you can do the transactions. So like all the firms have some rules that you have to obey to. You can't be just doing anything you want, right? So like the companies like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they have the policy that if you're working there, then if you buy an asset, then you can't sell it for 15 days or 30 days, things like that. If you have to do, you have to take permission, like from the compliance officer, etc.
Okay.
In trading firms, also you have similar kind of rules, but less stringent, I would say, compared to a big firm.
Quadeye doesn't have any such rules, just mentioning, like, because
Okay.
it's an HFT, so like for manual trader, it's not like easy or even possible to
It's not
copy,
possible to like copy
just
anything.
copy their
That's true.
trades.
Mhm.
HFTs do not have
I mean,
that.
it's not possible to do it in a big bank also, but they are generally always more careful around
Yeah.
their policies.
Would it be relatively easier to switch in between the four quant roles, dev, research, strategist, trading? I think Bhavya has already answered this question. Like, it would be easy
Yeah,
for a
and if in a bigger firm, it's also easy. But like in my firm, I started as a developer. Then I was in 1 year I was writing strategies. In another 1 year, I was already doing trading. So if it's in a small firm, you are basically doing all 3 or 4 of them. So I basically do all 4 of them now. And if it's a bigger firm, then you have a more dedicated role, but it's still possible to switch very easily.
Any more questions from you guys? Uh,
Yeah, so hello, Bhavya.
Yes.
I had one question. So, like, considering a SDE job, you have a lot of options because a lot of firms are engaging in development activities.
Yeah.
But like finance is a restrictive field. So, do you find like as a quant, the number of jobs are restrictive, or like is it like con in that sense?
Yeah, there are let's say lesser options in number of firms, but all the firms are always hiring, right? They're always looking for smart people. So I still get reached out by like there's still like more than 100, 200 firms, right? And in many different geographies, trading different asset classes. A lot of crypto trading firms are now there. A lot of things are, and in terms of like latency, also some are like ultra high frequency, some are more low frequency. So there are different flavors of companies, and you get like different enough variety to move around. But yeah, you're right. It's not same as like an SDE role, which is practically present in thousands and thousands of companies.
there is another question, like how can we judge a good HFT considering there are a lot of new firms coming every year?
Yeah, whoever pays the most.
I
No,
think the
I mean,
best way would be to
yeah.
like ask someone who is like talk to an employee about the work life, about the things, because it's not easy to just judge online, I would say.
It
You
also
cannot.
depends what you are judging on, right? If it's you're judging on a work culture, you're judging on the compensation, you're judging on work-life balance. So
Yeah, our
many new
final.
firms are emerging, that's true. And like a lot of these are, you can like the way to see it is also who are basically the founders of those firms. They would either be from one of the older, bigger firms. So generally people take their strategies and make their own firms also. So yeah, it's also just good to see through the profile of people who are running it.
Okay, there are a few more questions. Are financial risk management courses in college beneficial for risk management roles?
Yeah.
And okay,
So for
and
risk management roles, yes, but not so much for quant roles. I think FRM, you can also do a certification in FRM, financial risk management. So that's very helpful in risk management roles. But I think one should know what one is getting into before going into risk management. I would say it's not particularly exciting job.
should we have knowledge of AI/ML for initial stages? Uh, I think it's already answered.
Yeah, I think it helps for quant researchers role. It's kind of a must, and yeah, a little bit of AI ML knowledge always helps in your career. Be aware what's happening.
Yeah, in what is the language that you use in your day-to-day activities in the trading firms? Like, is it Python, C++, or C sharp, or it depends on the application?
For me, it's always like 50-60% of the times I'm working in C sharp, 20% I'm working in C++, and 20% in Python.
Okay.
For me, it's, I mean, pretty much all C++ and maybe like and the analysis part you get in R or Python you can do.
Yeah.
Mostly the coding is in C++.
Yeah, everything you implement would always be in C++, like low level. Sometimes we write strategies and some interface works in C sharp.
And also, like in a given trading firm, so what is the difference between a software developer, like a systems role, and a quant role? So if you have any of your colleagues and friends.
Yeah, there are always system roles in these companies, right? And system people are generally helping with the network parts and basically making connections to, because it's not a single-handed job. It's like you're always dealing with a lot of other parties who are providing you market data, brokers, exchanges. So system people are generally making sure that all these connections are in place. We can receive data, we can send instructions out, we can get certain reports and handling with FTPs, different kind of protocols, and just all those things. Quants are, quants are basically more aligned with the business itself, right? Like how the company is making money.
And like, what would be the difference between a quantitative developer and a systems guy? Like, it seems similar, right? So, like, what would be the main
Yeah,
difference
in a
between those?
smaller firm, it would probably be the same.
Okay.
In a bigger firm, as I said, someone who's basically doing more coding versus someone who's taking care of networking, blah, and like making sure connections are up, quality checks, all those things.
I mean, the software roles are generally like distance from the finance side, so you don't need finance knowledge. It's all about like creating the infrastructure for the quants to do their job. So a lot of network stuff and yeah, so basically a lot of networks and latency intensive stuff.
For the quant research role, what is the possibility of getting it right after the BTech? Right after BTech?
So researcher roles are generally open right out of college. There's most of the firms that are hiring in India are hiring for the quant researcher or strategist roles.
Yeah, there was another question in the doc. Can you recommend any firms that have less workload, if you know any? Uh,
Yeah, my firm has less workload. Yeah, I think European firms generally have a relatively better work-life balance. I don't know the situation so much in India, but US generally in Asia definitely people work a lot more. Singapore and Hong Kong. In India,
yeah,
maybe Rishabh
can you
can
give
tell.
an estimate on that? Like how many hours a week in Europe and in India, like, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like for me, there are days when it's like morning 7:30 to evening 10:30, but
Okay.
that's like 2 days, 3 days a week. And some days are basically morning 8 o'clock to evening 6:30.
Got it.
Rishabh can tell more about India.
So in India, like you would expect 11, 12 hours a day on an average. Like I generally start around 8:30 and I would finish the day by 7:30, 8. And like mine is generally less variable because I think it's also about, like I rarely have to like stay up till 10:30 or 11 unless I have something that I need to push into production. So yeah, so mostly it's 11 hours or 12 hours a day. And
Yeah, also I had this question, like since there's the bonus system in the trading firms, so can the colleagues discuss amongst each other like regarding their strategies, or like what's the restriction on that?
Yeah, people do discuss. I mean, there are different kind of setups. So there are firms would have like big central teams, right, which are more working with on the core strategies of the firm, right? Then they are always discussing things with each other. And you have independent silos also as like part of a bigger team, and then each silo is running their own strategy. So people would discuss less over the silos, but within the silos. And then there are like once you grow a little bit into the career, like after 7-10 years, people also start running their own strategies completely. And then yeah, they of course don't discuss with others about them. So it goes more silent as you learn more.
you need to discuss, at least in our company, you would discuss a lot because, and like, don't think about it in bonus terms because even
Hmm.
if you are discussing is generally helpful. Like,
Yeah.
even if you have taught someone else and they have done well, then you would be appreciated for that, and that will reflect in your compensation. If you have
Yeah.
created something and you've just basically taught them something after spending a lot of time on it, then that's also helpful for the company and you would be compensated for it. So don't think that
Yeah.
sharing stuff will.
Generally, there is a lot of brainstorming and a lot of sharing of ideas, much more than people think.
And like how much time it would take to ramp up someone to ramp up if he's joining like with no experience in the field?
Yeah, everyone joins with no experience in the field. Basically.
Yeah, so like how much time is like required to ramp up, like any estimate on that?
You're always learning also, so there's no like point where you can say you know things, right? You're always learning. So I think there's like the learning curve, right? Initially you are learning much more and then gets to get a little more flattened over years, but it's always rising.
Yeah, so any more questions from the audience? Like we can wait for 2 to 3 minutes more. Like if there are no questions, then we can wrap up.
Yeah, final pros and cons, I would just say like the like biggest pros are just intellectual satisfaction for me is like the biggest pro, right? Like you really work on hard problems, you solve them, and then you feel happy, and then you see the returns in terms of P&L immediately. And cons that I feel the biggest con for me has been like sometimes finding the value of your work, right? That's sometimes you question, yeah, what are you doing? Are you just doing it to make money, or are you really adding any value to the universe? That's my personal pros and cons list.
So, I would say the same, that the pros are generally about the ownership of the projects, and like you take up ownership of the complete project very early on in an HFT or in a smaller firm compared to a large firm. So the results are much more evident, and they're evident live. And yes, you know that yes, I worked on this, and there's the result that's creating profit for the firm. And yeah, so and for me, the pros is also the compensation you get on. So and yeah, the con is generally longer work hours compared to the other SD roles. And yeah, sometimes it's like it's a zero sum game here. Like you are not really creating much value to the universe, but like it's something you personal, I would say, like if you really care about that or not.
Hmm. Any more questions?
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I had just one question on one thing you addressed before, that you can't frequently punch trades if you're working with JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. So are there
Mhm.
any workarounds on this? Like if you have some trading system and if you want to
Mhm.
continue uh, doing that system, and you also want to do a job at these firms.
I think some departments within these firms are allowed to do it also, but if you are working on the market side, so
Yeah.
any security, so Goldman Sachs has this division called securities division, right? JP Morgan has it's called the IB division, investment bank division. So
Yeah.
you can't do that. You can't have your you can't have your bots doing trading for you and not reporting them. That's
Not even
illegal.
in any other one's account or any other uh, type of
I mean,
workarounds.
you can do things, but they are illegal, right? Let me put it like
Okay.
that. They're not allowed. You can do all these blah in other accounts, in crypto accounts. No one can trace them, etc., etc. But
Okay.
these things are not encouraged, right? And also not healthy because there will be a huge distraction for you.
Yeah. And one more question, that which instruments or which segments do you prefer in ATG? Like what is traded most in mostly in volumes?
So we are basically trading cash equities mostly and futures in all the in the global market. So we trade India, we trade US, Europe, Asia, basically South America and Russia. So all the markets, but product wise, it's cash equities and futures for us.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but a
Thanks.
lot of successful firms are trading options also.
Mhm.
And yeah, they are very good in that. So that's not our niche, but a lot of companies do trade options, and now a lot of companies also trading cryptos, right? They're very successful in those.
Yeah, the like how hard is to start your own quant firm? There's another
It's not
question.
so hard actually. I mean, like once you have a little bit of experience, if you have some nice strategies, you can start a quant firm. It's not a um, like there are enough resources out there that you don't have to make everything from the scratch, and you could start a your own firm. There's no one stopping you. Sometimes yeah, capital could be a constraint. Sometimes very good infrastructure can be a constraint. So the way people go, the route people take is like if you are very experienced or sure of a strategy, then you do some kind of a deal with a trading firm, right? Who has the infrastructure, who has the market access. Then you do a deal with them that hey, I'm gonna run my own strategies. Whatever PNL I make, we take X%, I take Y%, you take. So that ratio can be anywhere between 20 to 50, sorry, 20% to 50% that you get the PNL cut. And that can be like really, really significant if you're trading on someone else's resources and capital. But that's the first step you would take, and then you would go about opening your own fund of quant trading firm.
Yeah, and for someone who is like straight out of college, like how he decides between a systems role and a quant role, like how he decides which role he wants to join. Like for someone who doesn't have any knowledge of like what happens in the job, it's very difficult
Hmm.
to choose between the two, right? So how can one choose?
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, there's no right answer to it. Maybe you can try both for one year, then take decide. I mean, like, don't like the way I want to say things generally on like from my experience is don't focus so much on hitting the right role straight out of college. I mean, yeah, it's all comes down to if you like it or not. It's not necessarily the role is good, you will like the your role because you might not find the best team, right? You might not find the best manager or mentor, and they play a lot bigger role in making you interested in a particular role than straight out just deciding before college which would
Mhm.
be the perfect thing for you. It never works that way. So just try it out. If you like it, keep going for it. If you don't, you can always move around in the first 4 or 5 years. It's easy.
How impactful is the work of a developer in HFT firms?
Yeah, it's very impactful. I mean, it's all about being fast, and yeah, developers are the one who are making systems faster. So they are equally important as traders in HFT firms.
Yes, any more questions? We'll wait for a minute or two. Then we can wrap it. Yeah, I think there are no more questions, so we can wrap up. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Bhavya Bhaiya and Rishabh Bhaiya, for your time.
Yeah.
It was really
Yeah.
insightful, like many things we didn't know.
Yeah, always. I mean, if people have more questions later, they can always email me or reach out on LinkedIn or something. I'm happy to help out and answer as much as I know. Thanks for being here.
Uh, yes, I'm stopping the recording now, like, so can leave.